Okay, in the last video I just stopped having decided what duration values were going to be. So I decided that 60 milligrams here at 5,000 revs per minute was going to be 44 degrees of duration, and I went down this side. And I also pointed out that I couldn't actually go down this side without getting a value from this side to tell this map selection what to do. So it starts to get more complicated. Right, so what I would like to do on this side then is pick my SOI, or my start of injection point. Now I've got a set of maps. So I've got a set of base maps, usually numbered 0 to 9, and I've got a selector which picks which one of those maps I will be using, so it will pick 0 to 9, and the choice is dependent on engine temperature. So depending on what the current engine temperature is, I will pick either 0, 1, 2, 3 and so on. So I've got 10 maps 0 to 9. Now once the engine's hot, it will be picking 9 anyway. So we'll just assume that no one is daft enough to tune their engine when it's cold. So we'll assume that everybody is going to be thinking about 9 anyway. So we've got map 9, and we can pick a value, and then we can use it to select over here, just like we've already said. But it's not quite as simple as that, because if you look at a lot of VAG diesel files, what you find is, yep, here's a choice 0 to 9, and I've picked 9. But if you look closely, very often there is some other maps known as dynamic maps. Now these dynamic maps include all of the SO9 usually, so in other words they are start of injection 9, plus a little bit of dynamic timing, in other words true timing advance that's got nothing to do with duration change. It's simply an advance in timing to give a little bit more power at some point because of the timing in advance, and not because the duration got longer and forced start of injection to start earlier. Now usually with these maps these figures don't change, so in other words this 27 degrees before top dead center that's on that map, the SOI9, would be the same on the dynamic map, because the designers don't normally allow for a possibility of this having dynamic advance at these wide open throttle values. So these two at this point are very often the same. Now of course that means that whereas this value could have chosen that duration map, it might be this value, whatever value is in here, could be choosing that map. Now and finally, of course, there is a limiter for start of injection, and again it's a sort of a temperature dependent limiter, but we've got a limiter, and that limiter says not so much which of these is okay, because when you look at it, it basically is a choice. So in other words, the result here could be that map, or it could just ignore all the maps and pick a value off of the limiter. So in other words, the value that is chosen could be any of those three. And so again, the value that's chosen to select duration could be the value off the limiter, because basically what will be chosen at the end by the ECU is the smallest that is reasonable. So it might be that one, it might be that one, or it might be that one. And there are whole loads of little values buried in these files that the ECU can double check against. So in other words, there will be values that say when SOI9 can be used, and of course that's usually just the temperature, so it might be something like 80 degrees. But there might be another value buried somewhere that says this map can be used as long as the temperature is above a certain value, and quite often that's not quite as high as this one, or it's the same, but they could be slightly different. And again, the temperatures here should balance against these two, but you have to look at the files to find out. But okay, let's say that because we're at wide open throttle, it doesn't actually matter which one of these we've picked, because we've simply picked whichever one is the best value we could get, and it's usually one of these two, because what you often find is that perhaps this one has been set at 30 before top dead center, and if these two are maxed at 27, the ECU is going to pick 27 because it picks the lowest, not the highest. Right, okay, so now we've got a chosen start of injection value. That start of injection value will determine which duration map we're using, so that's how that side works, but we've already talked about that. And at this point there are some more adjustments that kick in on some of the files. There might be an air temperature adjustment, and that usually is literally just an adjustment. So it might be either a slight multiplication figure, so a very small multiplication figure, or more often an actual number for SOI that's added on, and it's usually in the order of 1 degree, so we're not talking about huge numbers. So there might be a change of, let's say, an extra added on 1 degree here as a result of air temperature adjustment. Maybe it will be less than 1 degree, or maybe it will be a minus number. And there will be a change as a result of the air temperature there, air pressure here, and finally we will have our value. Now going back to this selection up here, when that is selected, again, could be here, so it could be there, it could be there, it could be the result of the 3 here, it could be after that adjustment, or it could be after this adjustment, so it's here. So it could be that this final ultimate value is the one that determines what's going on up there. And again, you have to dig pretty hard through a file to find out what is being accepted and what isn't. It's quite difficult sometimes. Okay, so here we go then. We've got to the point where we've got duration map telling us duration 1, 44 degrees duration, 60 milligrams, 5,000 revs. And at the same revs and the same milligrams, we are going to start injecting at 27 degrees before top dead center. Simple as that, apart from the silly diagram that's underneath. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop there, and I'm going to come back to the silly diagram that's underneath and try to explain what the two are doing and how they're interacting with each other.